Hello, I'm Aaron from Floor is Lava Productions and this is Better Mixes episode 2. So today we're going to be talking about panning. What is panning, you ask? Panning is when you send sounds to different speakers. So in music we tend to deal with two speakers or stereo, so we have a left and a right channel. All you videographers are screaming at me, what about surround sound? We will be getting onto surround sound in a later episode. We'll be looking at 5.1, 7.1, Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, how it's all encoded and how it all works. But for today I just want to talk about music. So panning is a bit of a strange one because everyone thinks that they've got a grasp of it. Because there aren't any controls like there are on compressors or EQs, people think they have the grasp of it straight away, when actually there's a lot more to think about than most people do. So I want to make 4 quick points in this episode about panning. Hopefully you'll take away a few little good bits of advice and hopefully we can clear up some myths. So point number 1. The old LCR argument. There are 2 schools of thought with this. One dictates that you should only send things to hard left, hard right or straight down the centre. I personally don't subscribe to this because I think that you can be a bit more creative with it, and if you know what you're doing and you know what to look out for, you can send things wherever you want. I understand why people do it like that, and I think it's a good thing for when you're first starting, but I don't think you should be limited to only 3 panning positions. I like to try and mirror a band on stage, so I will try and, in my head, have where they all are on stage, and then pan accordingly from there. And that leads me on to my second point. Okay, so if we are trying to mirror a band and everything is on stage, then we can get a bit cluttered in the centre with the drums and vocals. So this is where something called Pan's law comes into effect. So not many people tend to talk about Pan's law, which is a bit strange because it never seems to get mentioned with panning. Pan's law dictates that if you have a sound of equal amplitude and equal phase coming out equally of 2 speakers, it will gain a plus 6 dB of SPL, which means it will be 6 decibels louder purely because it's coming out of both speakers and it's panned exactly in the centre. So it means that equally there's the same sound at the same volume in the same phases coming out of both speakers. Now this can cause a problem because anything in your centre can be artificially raised in its level, which, you know, isn't ideal. So what you can do, and what I do, is most doors will have a Pan's law compensate. So this is Logic's Pan's law compensate. You'll notice that I did mention that it's usually 6 dBs worth of compensation, but I only like to use 3. I don't know what it is, but whenever I tend to mix with minus 6 decibels compensated, it tends to kill the centre a little bit and it just doesn't sound right. So I always use minus 3. Just for a bit of fun, go back to a mix you've already done, and if you haven't done this, put the Pan's law compensate on. See if it sounds the same, see, you know, what differences you've got. And next time you're doing a project, maybe try mixing with that Pan's law compensate on. So, point number 3. Stereo widening is a bit of a dirty word. I personally don't like stereo widening, but a lot of people swear by it. So stereo widening is an effect that you normally put on your master bus that widens your stereo field. Now, the way it does this is very clever algorithms involving phasing. So the word phasing should immediately start to ring alarm bells about, you know, putting things out of phase, you know, it killing a mix. So I don't like them because they are phasing things out. If you are going to use them, and it's perfectly acceptable to use them, just make sure that you're not phasing anything out. Make sure your EQ's spot on. Make sure it's not doing any harm to your mix. Whenever people say, what stereo wideners do you use? A good mix panned properly and EQ'd and compressed properly is the best advert for a stereo widener. Not needing a stereo widener is you know, just decent panning, decent EQ, decent compression, getting everything balanced, and you shouldn't need that stereo widener. Okay, one last point. Okay, very few times in audio production do I have any golden rules which are absolute that I tend to follow 99.9% of the time. This is one of them. I always do my panning last. There are exceptions, obviously there's always an exception, but if I'm using stereo effects, and obviously you have to have it in you know, stereo, but I will always pan last. That's because panning is a very good way of hiding mistakes. And unfortunately, usually you don't notice these mistakes until the song is out. So an example we can use is that if we have two guitar parts and they are slap bang right next to each other, and if you were to listen to them together, they would clash with each other and the EQ wouldn't be right. So if you move them like this, everything's fine. They're not clashing with each other. They're perfect. Now the problem is that if someone then listens back on a mono system, these two are clashing again. So even though it sounds great in stereo, in mono, you're causing friction between your two guitar parts. So I know what you're thinking. Who listens in mono? You'd be surprised. I think this kind of idea of listening in the car came from this, because AM and FM radios are only broadcast in mono. So that's why I think people tend to listen in cars and on radios, old radios, because it kind of cements that kind of mono feel. So a lot of phones, even though they'll claim to be stereo and have two speakers, sometimes it's just a dual mono feed. Sometimes I recently was speaking to someone who was putting in a big sound system for a garden centre, and the amp they were using was just 8 mono outputs. So each output was mono, because obviously you don't want stereo over such a wide outdoor area. So thinking back, if you then listen to your mix on that, it's going to phase itself out and you're going to have EQ clashes. So just try it. Just honestly try it. Try and pan last. I know a lot of you will do this anyway and have a mono button, and you'll check back every now and again. Mono, yeah, that sounds fine in mono. Perfectly acceptable. But I would just try and pan everything last. It really, really works. Honestly, you will get so much better at EQ and compression. You'll get so much better at noticing phase problems if you start doing this. So if you take nothing else from this video, please just pan last. Just give it a go once. You'll be surprised with the results. Okay, I'm Aaron from Floor is Lava Productions. You can catch us on Facebook. It's facebook.com/Floor is Lava Productions. You can find us on Twitter. It's @Floor is Lava UK. And you can visit our website. It's floorislava.co.uk. Okay, next week we're going to be talking about Donald Trump. Most people hate him. I think if you take some of the stuff he says, you can spin it into a positive and make your audio production a lot better. Okay, until next time, happy audio production.